know who killed Bunny Folger. Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca. If you haven't been here before, welcome. So today's video is another video in the series of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. Today we are covering episode 9, Sparring Partners. Before we get into today's video, if you have not caught up to season 2 episode 9, then do not watch this video. It will have spoilers. We will be talking about episodes prior to this. So definitely make sure you're all caught up before you watch this video. Also, I have videos from season 1 and videos for every episode of season 2, including the trailers. So I will leave those up above and linked down below if you want to go check them out. Every single one is important. I discuss different clues and theories based on the episodes, and it's a lot of fun, so you should go check them out. If you like these videos and you like the series, then I would really appreciate if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season, and once I hit 1,000, YouTube will give me some AdSense for the videos that I am currently making, and that would just be really amazing. So every subscriber helps, and I appreciate all of you who have subscribed so far. Also, you should definitely subscribe because I'm going to be making these same videos for season 3 once it comes out. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into season 2, episode 9, Sparring Partners. So first of all, we are pretty sure that Kreps is Glitter Guy. He hasn't come out and said that he is, but all the evidence points pretty obviously towards him being Glitter Guy. This episode is from Kreps' point of view, so he is talking about how little money he makes being an officer for the NYPD, how he has this side gig where he goes to other towns and kind of like helps out their detective departments in order to make a little extra cash. We also know that as Glitter Guy, he is also working part-time as a security guard, so the man has many jobs. We also see him taking a hair sample out of what is the Chickasha police station, and we can kind of infer from this that he's doing something sketchy, whether he's stealing evidence to plant somewhere or he's taking evidence and destroying it, which as Glitter Guy stealing the matchbook, we know he's willing to do, but we're not exactly sure what he's doing here. He also mentions that he is in love with a woman who we later realize is Cindy Canning, and they're kind of alluding to this throughout the entire episode, so it's not a huge shock. So next, Mabel has obviously told Oliver and Charles that Kreps is Glitter Guy, and they say that this man is too stupid to be able to do this crime, killing Bunny, planting evidence, going through the tunnels, all this stuff on his own, so they're relatively sure that there is someone above him who is telling him what to do and pulling the strings. The next thing that kind of happens as they're discussing this, Oliver comes in, he lets them know that he is indeed Greek-ish, and that his results came back and that everything is fine. And he also brings the bird, Mrs. Gambolini, into Charles's apartment, and he says, "I don't want her anymore, she kept me up all night." And as they're pushing the cage back and forth, voila! A hidden compartment is located underneath the bird cage, and what does it have in it? Rose Cooper's missing painting, the real deal. So they find this, and there are a couple questions that come up when you realize that there is a famous $1 million painting hidden under this bird cage. Just to list out some of the questions I had when this happened. Why would Bunny put the painting underneath the cage? Did she have the duplicate made in order to protect the painting? Did she suspect that someone was going to steal it and that's why she hid it? Those are kind of all the questions that come up when I'm thinking about why would Bunny put this painting underneath the bird cage? Why would she make a duplicate if she did? And why would she give the bird to Oliver? So this is kind of a question of like, how much did Bunny really know? So next we see that Alice has popped up outside of Mabel's apartment to give her a gift to kind of say sorry for being crazy and using your trauma to produce art. She created a puzzle for Mabel, which definitely helped Mabel later on in the episode to kind of clear her head and her thoughts. But at the end of the day, Mabel kicks Alice to the curb and says, "See you later, I don't trust you." And so I think that Alice is probably not involved in this, just they kind of dismissed her this episode. Like, I think she kind of almost came to say goodbye, not only to Mabel, but also to us. I don't think that we'll be seeing her again. We also learn that the person who claimed to be Leonora Folger is not Leonora Folger, and that the real Leonora has been in a nursing home and hasn't left for many years. And so Charles is doing his computer research and kind of realizes that he's been had, and that this person who he met with and talked with is somebody else. Next, we have Oliver's continued story that he is Greek. He told Will, he let him know, you are a Putnam through and through. And Will is really relieved by this, and already we're having a sneaking suspicion that Oliver might not be telling us the truth, but obviously I get why he's doing it. He loves his son. He doesn't want to lose him. His son has obviously been really distraught by the idea that Oliver might not really be his father, and their relationship has really grown in a lot of ways this season, and it's been great to watch. So I totally understand why Oliver made the decision to do this. So next we see that Charles has his father's watch and he's looking at it. It's also in the painting, and he is kind of messing around with it and pops it open and sees that there's an address inside. And at the same time that this is happening, Mabel is looking at Kreps' paperwork and also seeing that he has an address on his paperwork that says where he lives. So both Charles and Mabel have found the addresses for the people that they're looking for. And Charles basically finds the address, calls the number, and realizes that the person that he talked to, who claimed to be Leonora Folger, is actually the woman on the end of the phone. And I guess he tells her to come over because she does later in the episode. Mabel also shows up at Kreps' boxing gym and is basically interrogating him, expecting that because he's stupid, he will let something slip that will give her some more details on what's really going on here. So next, Mabel is accusing Kreps of murdering Bunny, of stealing the matchbook because it had his fingerprint on it. And he says that the matchbook didn't have his fingerprint on it. And the way he says it made me believe it, that he was truly doing it for someone else, doing the bidding for someone else. And I don't think that the matchbook had his fingerprint on it, but obviously if he was stealing it, getting rid of it, he made it seem like he had destroyed it, then that means that it must be someone who he's working with or someone who he is close with, whose fingerprint is on the matchbook. And in order to make sure that they don't look suspicious, he needed to steal it and get rid of it. So we still have this question of whose fingerprint was on the matchbook. Next, we see Oliver and Teddy getting into an elevator, and immediately we realize that Oliver was definitely lying to everyone. He is not Greek, because he starts to beat up Teddy. And eventually, throughout their spat, you realize that Teddy doesn't realize that he is actually Will's father, and Oliver is really upset about the whole situation. So now we switch away from Oliver and Teddy, and we are back to Charles and the questionable woman, who we immediately realize is Rose Cooper. Charles calls her out for it. I guessed earlier on in the season that Rose Cooper and Leonora Folger were the same person, but really the person impersonating Leonora is Rose Cooper, and Leonora just really isn't in the picture. So this woman is indeed Rose Cooper, and Charles immediately wants to know more about his father, whether he was a good guy, and what really happened, why Rose Cooper really felt like she needed to disappear. Switch back again, and we are back with Kreps and Mabel. Kreps says that he did not kill Bunny after Mabel explicitly accused him of doing so, and basically she's egging him on, and he says that he might be dumb, but he's with the smartest woman on the planet, and that he can do a better podcast than the trio can in 2 minutes. And so this kind of lets us know that he seems to be involved in the podcast, and it's pretty clear at this point that Cinda is the smartest person in the world that Kreps is with, but I'm interested to know whether he has recorded pieces for her podcast actually in this season of the podcast, or whether he just means that he assisted in the other podcast, All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. Kreps goes on to basically threaten Mabel and say that people go to jail all the time for things that they didn't do, and that somebody keeps trying to make Mabel the lead suspect, and with him being the lead detective, he can basically do whatever he wants. So he's kind of telling her to watch her back because he clearly doesn't like her and is kind of gunning for her. But also Mabel seems to have gotten the information that she wanted from him, this information about him dating the most beautiful woman, the most smart, intelligent woman in the world, this information about his interest and love for All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma, this information about him saying he could produce a podcast better than theirs in 2 minutes. And so this is all pretty clear to say that we know what's coming at this point. As Mabel is kind of checking out and leaving, she finds more chicken merch at the gym in Kreps' stuff, and we saw this initially in the glitter guy bag, this chicken logo. Mabel knows that she has seen this somewhere, and so she goes home, she starts doing the puzzle that Alice gave her to clear her mind, and realizes that the chicken merch is actually mentioned in All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. and she realizes that it's mentioned for the Chicken Chug, which is a place that Cinda Canning used to go to meet locals and cops who were homesick, who were basically there helping out the community to get a little extra money. So now we're connecting the dots. We know that Cinda made this podcast, All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. We know that Kreps was in Oklahoma helping out on the case to get some extra money as a police officer. We know that he was possibly tampering with evidence and that he met Cinda at this Chicken Chug bar where clearly they struck up a relationship of some sort. Kreps is clearly thinking that this relationship is romantic and that they really like each other, whereas I'm not so sure that Cinda would agree. She seems like a really manipulative person, and it wouldn't surprise me if she was using Kreps to get the evidence and information she needed, and then she would eventually discard him. But at this point, she clearly has a connection in the NYPD that is helpful for her. The next thing is that when Mabel is looking to listen to All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma, we actually see the details of multiple episodes, episodes 1 through 4, as well as the main title and the summary. So I just wanted to read those to you because I think there are little underlying clues within this Spotify podcast page. So first it says, a peaceful small town is rocked by the disappearance of a lively young woman. The investigation reveals a sordid underbelly that no one expects. Hosted by Cinda Canning. So next, episode 1 is called Where is Becky Butler? And it says Becky Butler's disappearance in Chickasha, Oklahoma in 2015 sent shockwaves through the town. She'd evaporated just like the man-made lake at the abandoned Chickasha putt-putt course. Episode 2 says Becky Butler's reputation. And underneath it says, everyone in Chickasha seems to have something to say about Becky Butler's reputation and past relationships. Episode 3 is called Ray Butler, who was Becky's uncle, I believe. And it says, a look into Ray Butler's academic history reveals how a promising coastal scholar landed back home in backwoods Oklahoma. The 4th episode and last one that we can see on this list is called Vigil for Becky Butler. And it says Becky's former co-workers hold a vigil at the roadside grill, precipitating a standoff with the Chickasha choir ladies. So obviously none of this is explicit information, but there's a couple things that I want to glean from this, which is, as far as we know, All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma is a complete series where Cinda has declared that Becky Butler was not only discovered, but found murdered. And so clearly they were suspecting her uncle, they were suspecting past relationships, everyone in town had something to say about her. So you can infer that Becky Butler, when she was living in Chickasha, Oklahoma, had maybe a messed up past, especially with the relationship comments. There's also this expectation, as I just said, that she was found dead, that she was murdered. And when someone is murdered and you have someone investigating the murder as well as the police, if Cinda Canning claims she knows who murdered Becky Butler, then that means that probably somebody went to jail for the murder of Becky Butler. So I just think it's important to point that out. The next thing that I wanted to point out that is not necessarily a clue, but I thought was really interesting and important for the overall story of the show, is that basically Oliver and Teddy have gone into Oliver's apartment to discuss the fact that Teddy is really Will's father, and Teddy definitely seems apologetic, but they're kind of yelling at each other and Teddy turns around to leave, and we see Oliver turn to him and say, Teddy, Will is all I've got. My son is all I've got. And this is a huge change from last season when Oliver went to visit Will and said, my apartment is all I've got, because he was, going to lose his apartment because he didn't have the money to pay. So it's really amazing to see Oliver go from telling Will that his apartment is all he's got to telling Teddy that Will, his son, is actually all he's got, and knowing that Oliver now realizes the value of the relationship that he has with his son. Then we go back to Rose and Charles and the discussion they're having, and Rose reveals that within the nude portrait that she created underneath is a portrait that she made for Charles's father, and it is a portrait of Charles and his father standing looking at the Arconia, their backs to the painting, and the Arconia as the background. And Rose goes on to say that Charles's father was a good man and that he wanted a painting of the person that he wanted to be, a father to his son. And basically the gist of it is that Charles's father did not hurt Rose. He was actually in love with her and was trying to protect her from her violent husband. And when it came down to it, Rose decided that it was no longer safe for either of them to continue seeing each other and for her to continue being who she was. So she escaped, staged her own murder, and disappeared from her rage-filled husband. Next, we are very close to the end of the episode, kind of like the climax of the episode, and Mabel goes to the podcast studio to visit Poppy and ask her questions because Poppy did offer to help Mabel and really seems like she wanted to help the trio discover Cinda's lies. But all of a sudden, Poppy seems very afraid again of Cinda, like she doesn't want to talk about her, she can't help Mabel, she doesn't know what to do, but Mabel is very pushy and is relatively sure that everything has to do with All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma, and she wants to know how this connects to present day, Bunny's murder, the painting, and everything that's been happening. Then we switch back to Charles and Rose. There's a lot of switching back and forth in this episode, but it kind of like is happening at the same time. So Rose says that she's happy that Charles got this painting, that she's happy it's in his hands because a woman came sniffing around a few months ago asking about the painting, and she quickly basically tells us that it was a woman with brown hair and glasses, and Charles says, "Oh, Cinda Canning," and Rose throws her hands up and says, "I don't know who it was, but I didn't like her, she was pushy." Next, Mabel keeps pushing and is like, "Why are you so afraid of Cinda? I don't understand." And then Poppy turns to her and says, "Because I'm Becky Butler." I just did not expect that to happen, so I guess overall it was a really good twist, but it leaves a lot of questions open for episode 10 and the third season. And the biggest question is, why would Cinda claim that Becky Butler was murdered if she's Poppy White, if she's standing right in front of us? And why would Poppy / Becky Butler want this to happen? So that was the end of the episode. So let's get into the theories that I have. So the first thing that I'm going to say is that I don't know if they're going to tell us who the murderer is in the 10th episode. What if the third season is going to tell us who actually killed Bunny and why? And all this stuff about Cinda and Rose Cooper and Becky Butler and Poppy White and the painting are a completely different mystery, and like that's what we're going to find out in episode 10. There's a couple of things going on here. There's the stealing of the painting, there's the murder of Bunny, there's Becky Butler being discovered to be Poppy White. So there's a lot going on here. I do think that it ties together, but I don't think that the painting and the murder are the same thing. So let's get into it. Okay, so I think that Cinda was on the hunt for her next big podcast after releasing All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. And so she is looking into the age-old disappearance of the famous artist Rose Cooper. So Cinda is looking into the mysterious circumstances of Rose Cooper's death. She wants to have a podcast on it. So she starts reaching out to Bunny because she wants the painting. She wants to be able to look at it and inspect it for clues, but Bunny is refusing to give her the painting. She's like, "I'm not giving it to you, you crazy pushy woman. I don't care." So Cinda is pushing and pushing, trying to get the painting from Bunny. She's the one calling her. She's either the one who physically met her at the diner, or maybe she sent Kreps or Poppy to do it, but either way, she is on the hunt for her next Peabody Award-winning podcast, and Bunny is standing in her way. She also gets in touch with Rose Cooper, who is obviously not calling herself Rose Cooper, but somehow is following the line and trying to figure out who this woman is, asking her for the painting as well, and harassing her for information, which is what Rose tells Charles at the end of this episode. So Cinda doesn't realize that she is talking to Rose Cooper, and Bunny is still refusing to give her the painting. So Cinda sends Poppy to go do some research, and Poppy goes to Ursula, buys a bunch of gut milk, and gets some details on when Bunny is home, where she likes to go, what her daily routine is, etc., etc. Knowing that these people were after the painting, Bunny decided to have a duplicate made because she had a sneaking suspicion that this really pushy woman was not going to give up so easily. So she hid the original underneath the birdcage because she wanted to make sure she could protect it, and she hung the fake on the wall as a mislead. This is where the theory starts to really take hold, and things get a little bit wild. So the night that Bunny was murdered, Cinda decided to have someone break into the apartment to steal Bunny's painting. I'm thinking it was probably Poppy. So Poppy was the one who met Bunny at the diner and took the matchbook. So Poppy goes in to steal Bunny's painting, goes into the passageways, which somehow she knows about, possibly from asking Ursula, we don't know. She cuts herself on something when she's taking the painting off the wall and ends up bleeding accidentally on the matchbook. And as she's exiting the apartment with the stolen painting, she hears some screaming and yelling going on. She follows the noise and ends up coming to Mabel's apartment, and she peers up through the grate and she happens to be there when Bunny is murdered. She becomes frightened and runs off, dropping the matchbook that she doesn't even realize that she has into the grate, leaves it for Mabel to find, and doesn't even realize that it's gone until Mabel texts the number, assuming that it's Detective Williams, saying that they found evidence, that they found this matchbook, and that they would like to give it to the police. Now, the reason that I think that that number is Poppy's is because after she saw the murder of Bunny happening in Mabel's apartment, she got freaked out and she texted the trio because she thought maybe they would be next. She knew she was in Mabel's apartment because Cinda had been keeping a close eye on them, getting details and whatnot. And so she texts the trio to get out of the building because she's afraid that they are in danger. So they have Poppy's number, they don't even realize it. They text Detective Williams to let her know they have this evidence, and pretty quickly after, Poppy receives this message and freaks out. She's like, there's a fingerprint on this matchbook, that is mine, but I am not the killer, what do I do? So she lets Cinda know because she's freaking out, and Cinda tells Kreps to go get the matchbook and destroy the evidence so that they don't get in trouble or caught for the stealing of this famous painting. Kreps agrees, and that's how we go on to the glitter guy story. That's why he ends up going to get the matchbook. Now, at the same time she sees this murder happen, she also texts Cinda to let her know what's going on, and Cinda meets her outside of the Arconia with the podcasting gear, ready to catch it all on tape because she is a podcaster first and a human being second. So Poppy, freaked out, comes racing out, and Cinda's like, girl, pull it together, put the painting, wherever we're gonna put it, and we'll deal with this later. So all of this to say that I don't think that Cinda, Poppy, or Kreps had anything to do with Bunny's murder. I think that it was just a coincidence that they were stealing the painting the same night. So that leaves the question, who is the murderer? Who killed Bunny? And if it wasn't for the painting, then why? I think that there's going to be a final twist, either in this last episode where it leaves a cliffhanger where we're like, who's the murderer? We still don't know. Or there's going to be a final twist where we just learn who the murderer is and it doesn't have to do with Cinda or Poppy. So the person who I think the murderer is, the murderer of the season, I think this person is Howard. I will not let this go. I still think that it's Howard. And I said this in other videos, but just to give you a quick recap if you haven't watched them, which you should, I believe that Howard is the killer because he is actually Bunny's son that she gave up at birth. He feels very lonely, which we know from his discussions with Dr. Grover, as well as the note found in Tim's garbage can, which seems to be Howard's handwriting saying, I don't want to be lonely anymore. So all this to say, Howard is lonely, he was given up at birth, and he's angry that Bunny gave him up. He figures out that she is actually his mother and decides that he is going to kill her as revenge. He goes after her and she recognizes him, which is why she says, what the fuck are you doing here? And then he attacks her. Now, as he attacks, she races over to Mabel's apartment because she believes that the trio is still in there. Howard follows her and he ends up closing and locking Mabel's apartment door behind him. He's been planning this for a while, and he stabs Bunny with the knife that he stole from Oliver's apartment, and then he grabs the knitting needle and stabs Bunny through the chest. So as all this is happening, he is surprised by Mabel coming into her apartment to get more champagne, and he races off. He has already notified the police anonymously because he wants to frame the trio, and the reason that he is trying to frame the trio is because he was involved with Jan in the Tim Kono murders, and he doesn't want the trio to be digging around anymore and find any more evidence that points to him being partially responsible for Tim Kono's murder. So he frames them, figures he will kill two birds with one stone, the podcast will end, the trio will go to jail. Afterwards he ends up in the art catacombs where he is escaping, and Lucy spots him, but she doesn't see who it is. Yeah, that is my theory. I know that that was long-winded, but there's like so much that's happening in this season, it's hard not to be long-winded. And the reason that I think that Jan and Howard were in cahoots is because last season in episode 8, Jan kept telling the trio that she thought that Howard was really the murderer and not the Demuses, and I think that she was trying to frame her co-murderer, whether they are just besties who like to murder together, or he also had something against Tim Kono, which we know that he did because he says that Tim Kono hated his cat. But whatever the reason is, he and Jan decided to murder Tim Kono together, and afterwards Jan was taking the fall for it. She was claiming that Howard was the actual murderer. She wanted him to go to jail for it, and in order to make sure he was never discovered as being associated with the Tim Kono murder, he framed the trio and he murdered Bunny. So that is my crazy theory for this season, and I hope that you guys enjoy this video. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification, all those YouTube-y things, and I will see you next week with another video about Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. Bye!